Have you ever had the experience of putting some time and effort and maybe even some money into, fixing something up and making it nice and trying to create something that is really good and then someone who didn't appreciate the time and the effort and maybe the money comes in and messes it up? Has that ever happened to you? Parents, you should have your hand up right now. Right? It's like, I just got this place cleaned up, and you guys tracked in all the stuff. What's your problem? There's that scene in the beginning of the movie The Incredibles, right? Mr. Incredible is kind of grousing about the burden of being a superhero, and he's like, I feel like the maid, I just got this place cleaned up. Why can't the world just stay saved, for a while? If you're a parent, you get that. If you're a manager at your work, you get that. If you're in law enforcement, you get that. If you're a nurse, you get that. You know who else gets that? God. And the reason for that is that our God is a God who builds. Open your Bibles to the beginning. We're gonna start there today. We're gonna look at a few other passages too, not quite as many as last week. Thanks for being with us today. For those joining us here in the room, thanks for being here. For those watching online, thanks for logging in. Appreciate you doing that. Last Sunday, we started a new series on the character of God called A God Who. And for a few weeks, we're talking about how this idea that who God is shapes who we are. And today's message is on the generative nature of God. Now, notice I did not say generous. God is also that, and that's a sermon for another time. I said generative. This is a word that has gained a lot of use in recent years, especially applied to the growth of artificial intelligence, AI. It tends to get used in conjunction with that. Here's what it means. Generative is an adjective, and it means having the power or function of generating, originating, producing, creating, or even reproducing in some cases. This word describes a part of God's nature, that God is a God who builds, He creates. Last Monday, a bunch of us staff guys were standing around in the copy room talking and just kind of interacting. Hey, what happened yesterday? How'd Sunday go? Normal church staff stuff, I guess. And Daniel Brown, our kids pastor, was talking about something that happened in kids ministry. And he's telling several of us guys this story of what they were talking about in kids ministry. And I was like, dude, that is so cool, because we're talking about this in the big room here in a couple weeks. And I wanted you to be able to hear it. So we ran down to the kids area, grabbed a phone and recorded him telling the story. You got to check this out. This is so cool. Listen.
Hey guys, I just wanted to peel back the curtain a little bit of what's been going on in kids ministry recently. So at the end of July, we discussed and talked about, we're summarizing the end of the Bible, and God gives a revelation to the Apostle John. And he talks about specifically a new heaven and a new earth, that God is preparing a home for us that's beyond our wildest imaginations. We can't even begin to describe it. And that is the eternal existence that we are being prepared for. Then the following week, the very first week in August, we circled back around to the beginning of creation. Before time itself, that God breathed into existence life itself as we know it. And at the sixth day, He created man and woman, and He made him in His image, in the likeness of God. And so we got to do a really cool activity. We got to use a mirror. And each of the kids, they walked up to the mirror and they would write words of how they would describe God as a creator. And they also got to recognize and see that they were made in the very image and likeness of God, that God built into them an intrinsic capacity to create, to be a creator, to give Him glory. And so we see throughout the entire scope of Scripture that God is building, that He's preparing, that He designed the world and He designed you and me in His likeness, and He's preparing this home. And He is a good, good God, and we get to worship Him. So that's just a little bit about what we've been learning about, but very powerful couple of Sundays that the kids were able to start putting pieces together of this God and the big story, that God is a God who builds.
I thought that was so cool. Now, I don't know if being made in the image of God gives you an epic side eye. Like my son in the red shirt with this weird smirk on his face. We'll deal with that boy later. It's incredible how many times God kind of weaves these themes together. And God, we're made in His image. He built us. He created us. So I want to look at a few passages that describe this idea of God as a God who builds, and talk briefly about what they mean. Here's the first one. You know this one. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. C.S. Lewis said, no philosophical theory which I have yet come across is a radical improvement on the words of Genesis that in the beginning, God made heaven and earth. From beginning to end, the Bible affirms that God is creator. It's the foundation of the entire universe. The first thing that the Bible says about God is that He creates the universe, which you need to understand in its original context was very different from what the people in the biblical world thought about how the universe came to be. The idea was that there were many gods and that they were in conflict with one another, and that the universe generally was made out of the body of the defeated god. That was common all through ancient mythology. And then the faith of Israel comes along, and they say, no, God spoke, and it came to be. I had a t-shirt in high school that said, I believe in the Big Bang. You know, now as a six-day creation dude, everyone's like, what? And on the back, it said, God spoke, and bang, there it was. And I mean, this is the picture that Scripture paints here, right? That God speaks it into existence. It is the first and one of the most consistent claims that the Bible makes about God, other than assuming His reality. The Bible makes that assumption. It just over and over and over again through the whole Bible, we see this doctrine being taught that God is a God who creates. He's a God who builds. Moses says it. David says it in the Psalms. Isaiah and Jeremiah say it in the prophecy, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, all of them in the New Testament affirm that God is creator, that God is a God who builds the universe. Let me give you another example. From Moses in Genesis 1:26, we read, then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them. That's what Daniel was talking about a second ago. And then in Jeremiah 33, verse 1, it says, while Jeremiah was still confined in the courtyard of the guard, the word of the Lord came to him a second time. Now, when you're reading the Bible and you see the word Lord in all capital letters, that's a clue to you as an English reader that that's translating the covenant name of God, in Hebrew, Yahweh. Right? So that when you see this, there are lots of names for God in the Old Testament, but that's telling you the underlying original language word. The Lord, who formed it and established it, the Lord is His name. And Paul writes in Colossians 1:15, the Son, notice the capitalization, the second person of the triune Godhead, God the Son, existing in the form now of Jesus of Nazareth. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in Him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created, look, through Him and for Him. The universe exists for the benefit and glory of Jesus Christ. That our God created the world and He created everything in it. And not only did He create the world, but His creation was perfect in its beginning. In Genesis 1:4, God creates light. He speaks it into existence. And He says, this is good. And 6 more times through the creation story, God will say, this is good, this is good, this is good. And then when He makes humankind, when He makes us, He says, this is very good. And the word translated good there is one that meant objectively good. Good that conforms to an objective standard. Not like it's good because I like it. No, it's good because it's good. Because God made it. And God made it good. He made it right. Creation's initial goodness is both derivative and dependent, right? It derives from God. It's dependent on God's goodness, but it is good. God made the world to be good. Creation was perfect. And then there was a serpent and a piece of fruit, and the whole world fell into ruin. Paul says that creation was subjected to futility. We fell from our original perfection into sin. We had a choice over whether or not to love and obey our Creator, and we chose not to in the person of Adam and Eve. And every one of you in this room and every one of you watching online has made that choice your own at some point. I don't know how old you were when you first committed your first sin where you understood, and I'm not talking about the rebellion of little ones who just don't want to take a nap. I'm talking about you knew right from wrong. You didn't need money to tell you. You became a moral free agent. You knew the wrong thing and you chose to do it anyway. And every one of us in here has had kind of our own Garden of Eden experience that way. And we're broken by our sin. We have fallen from that creation, that perfection. And that really sets up the big idea that I want you to take home with you today. Here it is, that God made this world for us. We destroyed it, and He rebuilds it, often through us. And that's a testimony to His grace. And we're going to talk about that today. So how does God's role as one who builds define the way we should live, right? Who God is shapes who we are. I think His generative nature is best reflected in us when we do two things. Two things. Here's the first one. Number one, make good stuff. Make good stuff. And yes, stuff is a technical theological term. Make good stuff. As I said before, when the world was created, God called it good. It was objectively good. We see God as a builder putting good stuff into this world that He created. Bruce Herman is the Lothlorien Distinguished Chair in Fine Arts at Gordon College in Wenham, Massachusetts. In an interview on faithandleadership.com about 10 years ago, when the journalist asked him, why is it important for Christians to make art? Here was how he responded. Artists who have a deep Christian faith actually have an advantage, I think, over people who don't believe in God. Because, theoretically anyway, if they love God, they will be paying closer attention to what God has made, and therefore their work will take on greater complexity and beauty, like I think it has in ages past in the work of great artists like Johann Sebastian Bach, a Rembrandt, or someone like that. His point is that Christians should be more motivated than anyone else to put good stuff into the world because that's what God did. Here's something else to think about. When God sent His Son into the world, who you'll remember from what we read earlier, right, was present in and participated in, present at and participated in creation. God had His Son learn the craft of being a carpenter, a builder. Look with me at Mark chapter 6, verse 1. Jesus left there and went to His hometown, that's Nazareth, accompanied by His disciples. When the Sabbath came, He began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard Him were amazed. Where did this man get these things, they asked. What's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he's performing? Now look, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son? Why not Joseph's son? He might be dead by this point. We don't know for sure. But here Jesus is identified as the carpenter, not Joseph. So it's likely Joseph is not around anymore. Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Can I get a little Bible geeky on you for a second? The word translated carpenter here is the Greek word tekton, which you can hear in the second half of our English word architect. Right? This describes, usually it's translated carpenter, but it describes someone who could work with wood and metal and stone. Honestly, the word builder might be a better translation than carpenter, because we think of carpenter, and either you think of someone who builds a house or someone who builds furniture, right? So it works with wood. We primarily think of wood. But Jesus would have had all of those skills as well as being able to lay brick and carve beams and make a lattice for the window and then forge the handle for the doorknob. Like he could just soup to nuts do the whole thing, right? Incredible level of craftsmanship. There's something else historically you need to know. The city of Nazareth is located on one side of the hill. Across the other side, so it's 4 miles around or 2 miles up and over, is the city of Sepphoris. When Jesus was really little, maybe even shortly before He was born, the Romans came in and they burned it to the ground. It was kind of a regional hub for Galilee. They burned it down and they took over and they made it their capital. So in the time of Jesus, by the time he's an adult, the city of Sepphoris on the other side of the hill from Nazareth was a pretty growing new city. There's lots of work, right? They burn it down, we're going to rebuild it like we want. And so every day, Joseph and his little boy Jesus would have made the trek, either 4 miles around the hill or 2 miles up and over to Sepphoris to work and build. Jesus would have had all of these skill sets, but beyond this, he would have been technically skilled and he would have been physically strong. I love how John P. Meyer states this in his book, A Marginal Jew, Rethinking the Historical Jesus. He writes, "The airy weakling often presented to us in pious paintings and Hollywood movies would hardly have survived the rigors of being Nazareth's tecton from his youth into his early 30s. Jesus was a builder. Because God is a God who builds, he calls us to put good stuff into the world because that's what he does. He's a builder of the good and he calls us to make good stuff. In about 9 months, I'll head back to Joplin for my 30-year high school reunion. I'm not sure how that's possible. I don't think it's been that long, but it has. And I was thinking about this as I was studying these. I was reminded of something that happened back in 2014 at our 20-year high school reunion. I had a guy come up to me at our reunion, and his worldview would probably best be described by the label of moral therapeutic deist, MTD for short. I don't know if you ever heard this term, so maybe you're learning another new word today. A moral therapeutic deist is someone who believes that there is a God, but they're not particular about which one. They just think that there's a God out there and that they want to live a good life because it makes them feel good to be good, but not because they have any fear of judgment ever, right? So MTD, moral therapeutic deist, it's a very common worldview, especially in our younger generations. And I think that that's where this guy was at because he came up to me and he just said something along, I don't remember, it's 10 years ago, I don't remember his exact words, but he said something like this. He said, "Hey, Casey, I know you're a pastor and I don't believe in all that Jesus stuff you talk about, but I did want to say, I just want to thank you for being so positive and specifically on Facebook, like putting good stuff out into the world. I just really appreciate that. And I don't buy into everything you believe, but I think that that's important. And I'm glad to see that you do that. And I just want to say thanks." And it all kind of came out as one sentence. And before I could even respond, he left to head to the bar to get a drink or something. And I was just sitting there thinking about this. And I'm going, how desperate is our world for people who will put good stuff into the world that me being not a jerk on Facebook is impressive? Wow. Are you putting good stuff into the world? Our God is a God who builds. And when he does it, it's good. Over and over and over, it's good. And so my challenge for you, if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're a disciple of Jesus, is to put good stuff into the world today. I want you to think, how can I be more positive? How can I put good stuff into my home, into my work, into my school? How can I be the kind of guy that at my 20-year high school reunion, someone will come up to me and thank me for not being a jerk? Our God is a God who builds. And so what that means for us is that we got to put good stuff into the world, but that's only half the equation. You see, not only do we need to make good stuff, we need to fix broken stuff. We need to fix broken stuff. There's this great commercial for Ally Bank where a senior age couple is greeting their teenage grandkids who are coming for a visit, and they walk up onto the porch. And the grandma says, "Oh, look at you. It's so good to see you." And as she's saying this, she's handing them stuff. It's a laptop and a router and a tablet and a phone. And she's handing them these things. She says, "Oh, look at you. It's so good to see you." None of this works. I love that, and their slogan is, the punchline is that for seniors, grandkids equals free tech support. Some of you are nodding, right? And it's not just seniors. There's been times I had to ask my son to do stuff. Here's the thing. God calls us not only to make good stuff, but to fix broken stuff. Because that's what he does. And he didn't even break it. We did. One of the other key texts that asserts that God is a builder is in Hebrews 3. Look at this with me. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 1 says, "Therefore, holy brothers and sisters, who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything." Now, it's really interesting to me that the first thing that the writer of Hebrews, and we don't know who it was, we really don't. So the modern scholarly consensus is that it was Apollos, Paul's associates, Priscilla and Aquila, remember that story? May have been him, we really don't know. Probably wasn't Paul, but beyond that, we're not sure who it was. The author of Hebrews, whoever it is, begins by calling them holy. Did you catch that? Holy. Now, when I wake up in the morning and my feet hit the floor and I think about who I am as a person, that's not the first adjective that pops into my head, for me, generally. You know? So it's really fascinating. He calls them holy. You need to remember, church, that you have been made holy, made right by the shed blood of Jesus when he died on the cross in your place for your sin. He made you holy. When you appropriate the salvation that Jesus purchased for you, when he took away your brokenness and made you whole, he made you holy. And therefore, Jesus needs to be the focal point of our lives, since our only hope of salvation, the only hope of fixing the broken stuff in our world, is Jesus. Not only did he build the house, the author of Hebrews says, he rebuilt the way that people could have a covenant relationship with God. Do you see what he's saying? He says, this is even greater than what Moses brought you. Moses brought you one way to have a covenant relationship with God. Jesus brought an even better one. So he took this house that was busted and it didn't work right, and he fixed it up, and now it's awesome. And we can have a relationship with God by grace through faith. We built a house yesterday in our parking lot. Well, the walls of it, anyway. This is more than just being generative, though. This is more than just putting good stuff into the world, because the organizations that we have partnered with to do this are also stepping into communities that are experiencing some form of brokenness, and they're bringing wholeness into that. It's more than just making good stuff. The other part of the equation is fixing broken stuff. I want to invite Ron Greiner to join me on stage today. We had a great day yesterday building the walls of this house with the Fuller Center for Housing. And, Chapel Rock has Chapel Rock Community Development. And Ron is the executive director, right? Is that the title of that? And so, along with leading Mission Indy, he's a busy guy. But I wanted him to kind of recap what happened yesterday and how we're moving into that space.
Yeah, it was an amazing morning. For those of you who couldn't be here, over 100 people, I think, were volunteering in some aspect of that. The walls were actually put together, the panels themselves, about 30 of them, before noon, which is incredible. And then the walls were erected in the shape of what will be the home over about 10 minutes away in September, October, before 1 o'clock. So a lot was done. But even if you had to miss that, there's still more opportunities for you to be involved. For instance, September 25th through October 13th, when the walls are put together and the house is built for Holly, the homeowner, there's opportunities to deliver lunches and pray with the workers and encourage them, or just show up at the site and say, wow, we're just glad that you're a part of this. And so plenty of opportunities.
Wow, awesome. So when Chapel Rock Community Development was doing some of our survey work, some of the discernment phase, there were kind of two key areas where as through our prayers we were seeing this is where we feel God leading us to step into that. One is the housing issue. I don't know if you know, some of you, if you've had to look recently, like Wayne Township is full, basically. I mean, just the housing stuff is really a challenge here. So that's one part of it, and Fuller, our partnership with that is that. But what's the other piece?
Yeah, the other one that you told us was about education, and we're really excited. God has been moving in big ways to help us start an adult English class here at Chapel Rock. We have several people from the church that have gone to a church on the north side that's been doing a church-based English program primarily for immigrants for 18 years. And they've been teaching us, encouraging us, and helping us to get ourselves started. God has supplied a dynamic director for this program. We're still looking for teachers, classroom assistants, people to work with children in childcare and tutoring for that side of the program, as well as probably a couple of creative people to plan some social events. So a lot of things happening and many more things. So we have a kiosk out in the lobby. Love to have you stop by, pick up a flyer, and just explore ways that you could be involved as we try to help our community, love our community in more holistic ways.
So this is kind of my hope and my vision for what the church, Chapel Rock community development could be, is that we're going to make good stuff and we're going to fix broken stuff.
Absolutely.
And so if you want to be part of that, then check out the kiosk and continue to just keep your kind of radar open for what CRCD is doing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. God bless you. Will you express your appreciation for his leadership that way? In Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis wrote, "Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. And at first, perhaps you understand what he's doing. He wants to get the drains right and fix the leaking roof. And you knew those jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in ways that hurt abominably and does not seem to make sense. What on earth is he up to? Well, the explanation is that he's building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were going to be made into a decent little cottage, but he is building up a palace because he intends to come and live in it himself." Paul says we are God's workmanship. He's building you. He's rebuilding you. And he wants you to help do that in the community that you live in. Did you hear me today? Did you get the big idea? God made a world for us. We destroyed it. And he loves us so much, he's rebuilding us, and he's using us to do it. So the challenge for you today is twofold. Maybe you're here this morning and you're already a disciple of Jesus. And I want to urge you to commit to making good stuff. Work hard in your work. Do the best that you can. Manage the affairs of your home well. Put good stuff into the world. But maybe today you came in and there's something broken. Maybe you've not yet bent the knee to Jesus and said, I've tried running this thing and I messed it up. Would you be my general contractor, Jesus? Would you rebuild my life according to your principles? And if you've never made a decision to follow him, you've got an opportunity to do that now. We're going to stand and sing in just a second. And as we do, I would urge you to come forward. You can go to the next step room. One of our elders is there to talk with you. If you have a prayer request, we'd love to pray with you. But I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet, and we're going to sing together and ask you to respond as God leads you today.